Okay, let's get started. Happy week 11 in November now. We're in the last 5 weeks, and it's not even really 5 weeks. It's more like 4.5 because of Thanksgiving. So we are definitely in the home stretch here of the semester. So yay! I think that's probably how most of us feel. So a couple things I wanted to really just, I guess, one thing. Well, two things. Two things I wanted to talk about before we get to the lecture content. The first thing is, so I got through at least my chunk of the combat scripting assignment paper designs. I know Brantley's been working diligently on his chunk. There may have been a few on my list that came in after I sat down to grade them, and so that doesn't mean they're late. It just means that they came in on time, but before I sat down or after I sat down. So I might still have a few more, but I got through most of them, and I got through enough to sort of see a trend in these paper designs I wanted to talk about a little bit. Now, I don't think this is actually at all what I'm about to go into your fault in any sense. I actually think it's something that myself, I keep saying Brantley, but I have to remember that there's going to be a time someday where it's going to be me and someone else, and not. I know that's sad, but someday, hopefully in the distant future. But I always say Brantley and I have to figure out a way to maybe fine tune this assignment to get a little bit more of what I want out of it. So what do I mean? So I think the trend in so many of these paper designs that I saw, and I didn't really take off really much at all for this, incidentally. Um, so don't worry, it's not like I just killed everyone's grade, because I do recognize that I think there's some reasons why. The maps tend to be these sort of open maps with kind of enemies sprinkled in like so much salt and pepper. And I recognize that that's what the toolkit we give you is kind of best at doing, right? I mean, they have these AIs, you can place instances of them. Yes, there are some tutorials, and Brantley should be teaching you in labs in terms of how to spawn them, so at least you can have a fresh spawn when you walk into a room or whatever. But what they really don't do well, or at least what this tool set doesn't do well right now, without a lot of work on your end, is kind of wave-based spawning. Where the scenarios we talked about in the scripting lecture before, where you might have 5 enemies and you get down the 2 left and you bring in a couple more. That kind of wave management is not really a thing that the tool does, unfortunately, right? I mean, it gives you cool single-player AI, it gives you a ton of weapons, gives you lots and lots of good stuff, just not that. And so, so often the technology sort of is the tail that wags the dog. And I even teach that, don't go against the grain, just, to some degree. That is a good principle. So I do understand that in general, the tools lend themselves to that, like I like to say, the salt and pepper approach, just kind of sprinkling the enemies around. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is my hope, and some of you are doing this, and some of you may certainly make adjustments to be more like this, and you don't necessarily need waves to do this either. What I'm really trying to get at with this assignment is these very sort of tight, well-constructed, well sort of choreographed fights that you would have in sort of medium-sized rooms or spaces, where everything is kind of carefully balanced, the layout is carefully constructed. Remember the Gears of War example where there's that cool flanking path, right? Like that's not a big space. That's just simply, a bunch of cover in kind of the main area. Then you got the cool little flanking path on the side. That's not even using the vertical axis very well, but just that flanking path is really interesting, right? So, and I think part of it too is just some of you may have wanted to do that or planned to do that and just didn't put it in your paper map, right? So that's the other thing that may have happened as well. So I think it's largely not your doing here. I think it's largely just the technology that we acquired that gave us the ability to even do this assignment. We need to maybe iterate on it in a future class. Maybe I need to either sit down and write a wave-based tool, or even better yet, find someone else that did one that we can add or whatever. And we're always evaluating this. But the first time I taught this class, we didn't have this assignment at all, and no one got the ability to. And I know some of you are like, really lucky them, less work. But no, it's actually the opposite of that. If you're going to be a level designer, you really need to have these examples, these sort of abilities that you can show in your portfolio. So be glad that you have it. And your maps will still do that for you. Don't get me wrong. It will still demonstrate that competency. I'm just commenting kind of two things. One, just sort of where things at with that assignment and kind of what I hope you do. Yes. So there you go. Yeah. And that's probably something that's, you know, for a price, right? I assume it's another. Okay, all right. So there is, I mean, that person has even made a tool that I'll have to investigate. I will say, I went on their Discord like way back, I think like last fall, and had like a question or two, and was treated a little. Sometimes those developer Discords, you know, they're a little bit. Well, let me put it this way: they expect you to know everything going in, right? And they get a little bit like a little weird if they think you haven't done your homework. It's like sort of like using it's like posting a question on Stack Overflow, which I never like to do. Anyone know what that is? It's like a website for like programming questions, and yeah, they always act like half the answers are like, why didn't you just Google this before, right? And so I will never ask a question on Stack Overflow in my life because I don't want to be torn apart. Um, that's how their Discord feels, just a little bit like that. Um, anyway, at least when I was on it. So, but yeah, so to the extent that you can, you know, sort of modify, I mean, you know, your existing projects to get a little bit more of that feel, that would be good. Because I mean, also think about the Bioshock Infinite example, right? That's not a very big room. You go in there, um, and you have like the interesting shooting gallery, the interesting spawn areas, you know, some cool choices in a relatively small area, trying to get the most that you can out of these. I'm not going to say small, maybe medium-sized combat spaces, and you know, having good reasons for the players to kind of stick around in an area, right? And again, some of you were doing this, but also saw a lot of, again, the salt and pepper thing, which is what we saw last year actually when we introduced this assignment. So I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise. So just keep that in mind as you iterate from paper design into your, you know, first white boxes or whatever. Should be a fun assignment, especially, you know, for you single player fans out there. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing um, is one of the cool things about owning. I mean, a PS4 could do this too, but you know, PS5 does this. I can be playing a game and I'll come across like a really neat moment where I thought, hey, this is like really relevant to some of the things I talk about in class, and I can just tell the PS5 to give me that last 5 minutes of gameplay. So I did that, and of course, yes, everyone's going to groan. It's Death Stranding, obviously, because I've been trying to chase the platinum. So I wanted to show this because I think it's some neat and simple, really, level design work in an open world context. So this is just like a 5 minute clip that I'll let roll, and I'll kind of explain as it goes. So, all right, some quick background here. This is a BT area. The BTs are the ghosts, right? And you can see in the middle of the screen that you get like they kind of appear as these black inky outlines on things. Okay, I am trying to pick up a piece of cargo that's inside of this ruined structure on the right, and you can even see like the little strands that are coming out of the cargo there. There's a piece that there's like a bunch of cargo that just kind of is in the world at all times, but that other players have dropped. But there's one for this particular, I'll call it mission. They call them orders in the game. This one particular mission I'm on is inside of this structure. So I approach the structure. I know there's BTs around, and incidentally, just to contextualize this for you, if you get caught by a BT, it's not really a thing where they damage you or take down your health. What they do is they basically pull you into a boss fight that if you lose, you know, there's like a basically a nuclear explosion and a giant crater, and it changes your map forever. And I'm actually over 100 hours in this game because I'm, you know, again trying to chase the platinum. I have not had that happen once, so I can't do, you know, I do not want that to happen. So yeah, you definitely don't want to be caught by one of them. So what I'm trying to do here is kind of see them from a distance and pick them off. with my blood-tipped bullets because they respond. Regular bullets don't hurt them. You have to use the blood-tipped bullets. Just more game lore stuff. But yeah, you shoot them. Okay, so cool. I shoot that guy, and you can see those footsteps there. That's them trying to get me. It's sort of when you use the guns, they make noise, they respond to noise. So you can never get too close to them when you shoot, or else they'll get you before you take them out. So you always have to be at some distance. So okay, I took out those two. Great, cool. But as I approach, and that line that's a line I drew on the map. It lets you draw like waypoint lines to help you, so that I put that there, that little flashing line. Um, all right, so I'm going to approach because I know that circle there, the antique art, that's the cargo I want. It's sitting inside of that structure, but my little scanner's going nuts because, there's a red BT. So red BTs are crazy dangerous because you cannot eliminate them with the blood weapons, the hematic grenades, blood-tipped bullets. So the only way you can defeat the red BTs is by getting close enough to them to cut their cords. You can see there's the umbilical cord. Every BT has one. And so now I'm presented with a conundrum. Like, if I just try to just charge in here, the noise I make is going to attract this thing, and I'm going to be in a difficult way, right? So I start to look at the environment to try to figure out what the heck am I going to do here, right? Like, I'm considering my path because I have to go inside to get that thing, get that piece of cargo. So now I'm kind of looking at this layout and go, wait a minute, what if it looks like it's open from the back? So now this is an interesting choice I have. Like, I could try, I'm thinking about using a ladder, which I could have used a ladder to climb over top, although I can probably just climb without the ladder. It doesn't look that high. But I'm thinking about how to use this structure to manipulate the situation in my favor. So I'm going to walk to the back, and I'm holding my breath, which is, you can do that to reduce the noise you make from your breathing. They respond to that, which then lowers your stamina quite a bit. All right, so I'm going back, and so, I can go in from behind. I might have a much better vantage point. See, that just a simple ruined structure. Anyone can make this. Anyone can white box this, but it just creates this cool choice I got to make in this situation, right? Like, instead of hitting it head on, going in from behind, real simple stuff, but it makes you feel smart in the moment, which is one of my sort of things in game design. Make the player feel like they're smart, right? Give them a simple solution, they solve it, you feel like a genius. All right, I'm going in there, and I'm thinking I might just try to sneak around the red BT entirely because there it is. And if I'm quiet, I might be able to go kind of under the concrete slab there. But it just so happens that his umbilical cord will float down, and I'll have the opportunity to cut it, which will make me feel really awesome here in a second. Yeah, that's the scanner. That boom you hear is just the little scanner thing. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I still haven't seen the little dialogue for cutting the cord come up, so I don't realize that sometimes the cords are hard to see. But there's the cargo I need to get, and I'm like, can I sneak underneath? Can I do this? Oh, there it is. I'm like, oh crap, I can actually, and I press the button after. That's why I punched there. There I go. I cut the cord. The only way you can defeat the red BT. Now I'm totally safe, and that's Coryllium crystals. That's sort of the reward you get for defeating them. Those are important in the game. So anyway, that's it basically. So I just really like that because, it's not complicated. There's not like genius scripting or anything. It's just a simple ruin structure. But the placement of the enemy, placement of the cargo, right? Like, my ability to kind of tactically use that layout to my advantage. that's kind of a cool example of some nice level design inside of, an open world game. I mean, that structure is always going to exist. It may not, I may never use that structure again, the next 100 hours trying to chase the platinum. But that one time it worked out. It worked out really well. Okay, cool. All right, so with that, let's go into today's lecture here. We're going to start talking about environment art because we're getting to the point of the semester where you're going to need to pick one of your projects, right? The obviously the deathmatch, the immersive sim, or what you're working on now. You're going to pick one of them to bring to a hopefully portfolio level art quality, right? So we're going to talk about sort of how you might go about doing that. We're going to talk about environment art even just generally in this lecture. Um, so hopefully in other classes or just through your experience, you have some idea of what an environment artist is in your junior year here at Purdue. In our new freshman curriculum, I make darn sure that they know this, but you didn't get those classes. So if you don't know, let's talk about it. So could be something like this: create visually compelling game environments, but that's not enough. We also have this game design thing we have to worry about, right? And environment art is no exception. The environment art doesn't get a pass. They can't just make things look good and not think about the game design at all. So a great environment art should always enhance the gameplay and storytelling and the game's goals, right? And remember, one thing I've kind of added to that formulation this semester is it should support the game's fantasy, right? Whatever that fantasy is. So the art has a purpose beyond just looking good, of course. All right, so what are the differences between environment art and level design? And we talk about this because they are like heavily adjacent, very, very adjacent. Maybe the most closely adjacent fields I can think of, environment art and level design, are like peanut butter and jelly. So it is kind of good to contrast them. Okay, level design, create paper designs, make blockouts, script things, use BSPs, basic familiarity with material creation in engine, directly authors the implementation of the game design, as I like to say. All right, so environment art, use concept art reference images, convert blockouts to final art. So you're taking those blockouts that level design has made and converting them to final art. That process is going to vary, obviously, project to project, team to team. Design and execute meshes that support action, which is something that good environment artists understand. Not all do, but the good ones do this, that like everything they make has to support, the actions that are occurring in the game. Obviously, there's going to be art that isn't going to affect it either way. It's purely decoration. So, obviously, if you're creating a little physics trash can that just gets kicked around, I mean, but you have a responsibility to know when a piece of art might affect gameplay, and to sort of keep that in mind. You're going to model in whatever tool that you like. Create more, whereas the level designer has a basic familiarity of materials, the environment artist should have obviously a much deeper understanding of materials and can use some of the cooler external tools like Substance and etc. You are enhancing as an environment artist game design with art. So if the level designer is directly implementing the game design or the moment-to-moment gameplay, the environment artist is enhancing that with visuals. All right, so kind of what you see is that a lot of the skills that are kind of peripheral to us as level designers are the primary skills in environment art. Maybe that's the biggest difference, maybe. So a good example is modeling, right? Now, I haven't had to do this in a really long time, mainly just because I think the expectations for level designers in this regard has changed a little bit in my career, but usually I think even now level designers typically can go into a Max or a Maya and make like a column or something, right? Like something simple like that. Generally, it's still probably expected, and you all take the introductory modeling class here, so I think all of you have cracked open a 3D program and made something. So yeah, level designers can typically do that. Now that said, I think it has changed a little bit. When's the last time I actually had to make something for a professional product, even as a white box object? A long time ago. A long time ago. Typically, we just use those basic shapes on Unreal now to do that, or whatever. So, but it's still basically a peripheral skill. And an environment artist, of course, they need to be, subject matter experts in these programs. They need to be aces at using these programs. Materials, kind of the same idea, right? Level designers, we can make and manipulate existing materials. If I need to make a flat red color, I can do it. Heck, if I need to make something with a normal map and a spec map, I can manage that. But I would expect, an environment artist to go way, way deeper, obviously. World building is not necessarily, I think, a case of a sort of a peripheral skill versus primary skill. It's more just a different perspective, right? I think level designers do just as much world building, but it's just from a different angle. Whereas I think the environment artist might execute world building, again, just the same amount of skill or effort, but again, just a kind of a different angle on how that might happen. Okay, so like I keep saying, these are just the Venn diagrams overlap quite a bit here between environment art and level design. And you do see a lot of movement around in the professions because of how complementary they are, right? In fact, all three of these professions, you do see movement around to and from in people's careers. Like I've seen people start as level designers and actually become gameplay programmers. Obviously, as you might imagine, that would be the more scripting oriented level designers. And I've seen environment artists. This is actually maybe the most common thing I've seen. Environment artists becoming level designers. They have worked for some period of time as environment artists, and they just decide they really like the design element that they're kind of involved in anyway, but they now want to do that full time. And these are never considered, by the way, like promotions in the sense that, well, I'm a level scripter and now I've really made it now because I'm a gameplay programmer. No, that's not really the right way to look at it. They're just changes of discipline, not changes of prestige, right? When you go back and forth between these, but they are highly complementary. So you do see that happen in people's careers. Okay, so with those kind of rudiments aside, let's dig into some stuff from a book I really, really like. It's a book that when I knew I was going to come here at Purdue and teach this class, I had taught classes like this before, but without really the need to get into this sort of material, right? Like because when I would teach at like a little for-profit college part-time somewhere, the students didn't have any previous training, so like 60% of the class would just be like how to use Unreal or Unity like at all, right? And then by the end, I would start getting into some of the things that we've been into this whole time, right? So when I knew I was going to take over this class, and there was this environment art component, in fact, it's called environment modeling for games, actually. I knew I needed to cover a certain amount of art material, and as a level designer, I have a certain amount of intuitive understanding about how environment art works, but I knew I needed a deeper understanding. So fortunately, one of my really good friends, is an art director, environment artist. I asked him, like, what should I be teaching from? And he recommended this Bruce Block book, The Visual Story. It's one of my recommended texts. It's very, very good. And that's what we're going to be basing these lessons off of. Okay, so Bruce Block lays out this idea of visual actors, right? Just these, unlike Unreal actors, these aren't, these game entities necessarily, but they're all the visual tools that we have to work with. And he's, of course, talking in the context of film and television, although he does mention games. His background, obviously, is in, film and television. And so these are our visual actors here: space line, shape, tone, color, movement, rhythm. So we're going to talk a bit about each one. Okay, so the space and the line. So obviously we're talking about the physical space in front of the camera. Now in games, the player controls this mostly. So that's kind of interesting, right? That doesn't mean that you can't think about the shots, right? Like if you were working in film, you're always thinking about getting a good shot, right? A really cool perspective. You do have moments in any game where you could sort of predict where the player is looking. And I remember attending a Rockstar Games GDC talk, and that's exactly what they do. Is anytime they pretty much know kind of how the player is going to be looking, like that you make them pass through a narrow doorway or something, those are the scenes they set up really carefully because they know that they're going to get a nice composed shot, even if just for a second, before the player starts looking around and doing all sorts of things with their controller. So there's lots and lots of predictable moments, even with player-controlled cameras, where you can set up things nicely. Okay, so the line actor is perceptual, not necessarily literal. So virtually everything can be considered a line. And here's a famous line right here, of course, the opening of Star Wars Episode 4, and you create this line here that's pointing directly from the big Star Destroyer all the way to the little ship, the Tantive 4, as it's called. And actually, to reveal my level of, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, actually, but my first computer I ever really bought for myself, I named the Tantive 4. So every computer since then, I just increased the Roman numeral. I'm on the Tantive 6 now because I try to make computers last a long time. So I guess the first computer I ever bought as a young adult was the Tantive 4. Now I'm up again to the Tantive 6, which came in this summer, actually. So anyway, yeah, you can see how the line points right to it, and it creates a really cool visual perspective here. All right, shape, tone, and color. So shape are the things that lines make, right? The silhouette of an object. So notice how there's some similarities here between this material and the architectural principles, right? Where we talked about point and line and volume, planes, that sort of thing. It's very similar, actually. Those two sets of materials gel together quite well. So what the lines make would be a shape. So that's something you can manipulate, the shapes of things. Tone, the level of lightness and darkness in grayscale in an environment. Color, obviously very complex, but very powerful and useful. Heavily influenced by light and whatever medium that you're working with. So color scheme is a very powerful tool. This is not a massively popular game, but I thought it had an interesting color scheme. Anyone play this, Daemon Ex Machina? It's on Steam now, not just on Switch. It was just on Switch when I put this together originally. It's a mecha game, and it has this cool kind of red-orange color scheme. I think is quite distinctive, and that helps give games a good sort of visual identity, consistent color palette. Okay, shape. Here's a good example here of how, as level designers began to master this visual actor of shape, how it could make things look a little bit different. So, what's kind of interesting about these examples is this is original Doom, but one of those modern things where they take a NVIDIA tech and there's like ray trace lighting and all that, but it's still the same basic geometry. Versus this is a shot from the original Dark Forces. And you can see that Dark Forces has a more interesting shape language. This is just a flat, square hallway. Yes, it looks really cool because the ray trace lighting and everything. But just a hallway here. And just with these bulkhead shapes, we get a softer movement through the space, right? We get just a little bit more of a sense of flow through that hallway. And there's a reason for that. Historically, Dark Forces, which was a Star Wars first-person shooter made with the same technology Doom was made with, they actually employed architectural principles for the first time. Like actually talked to architects, maybe even hired architects, I don't remember, and actually, tried to create things architecturally. Versus Doom was definitely designed from a sort of more seat of your pants. We're just going to make it cool as possible. We're not thinking about those things as much. Which, to be fair to them, I mean, they were the first, one of the first, right? So, it's a good example of how things get iterated upon. Okay, movement and rhythm. So, the eyes are drawn to movement in a scene, so that can be very useful. And the rhythm just refers to any kind of repeated elements in your medium. So it could just be elements in a room, or even things from shot to shot, or as you're moving through different environments in a game context. But any repeated element could be visual rhythm, and we see this everywhere, right? I mean, there's a visual rhythm to the ceiling tiles in this room we're in right now, or possibly statewide, you might have ceiling tiles. I don't know. But any repeated element in an environment creates a certain rhythm. And a good example of this in practice is if we look at this scene from Portal here. There's definitely a lot of visual rhythm happening here with, and we would call this affinity, by the way. This is something we'll talk about a little bit more in the next lecture on Wednesday. But the whole Bruce Block book is talking about contrast and affinity. That's the lens, if you will, that he likes to look at these things at, where you want to have affinity, sameness, because that creates comfort, but sometimes you want contrast because that creates excitement. And here we have a lot of kind of sameness and similar rhythm, which kind of creates this calm, sedate environment in which very dangerous things are happening, which is actually a really cool thing about how Portal's environments kind of play off of the kind of sinister nature of the game. Okay, so let's see if this will work at all. This clip. Let me because it looks weird here. Probably because right, I'm in the cloud. Let me see if this will work, or if I have to download this. I have to download this. Okay, 1 second. I always forget that embedded videos, do not play well in the cloud version of PowerPoint. Okay, so in this game, Metal Gear Solid 3, I know it's something ripped off of YouTube, so it's going to be low resolution. Sorry about that, but the game actually, I think, uses movement very powerfully because everything is very camouflaged in the jungle here. And so being able to spot movement becomes actually pretty important to the gameplay. Let's take a look at this. Now, admittedly, I'm moving the camera around a little bit too much, but or whoever is playing this actually. But see if you can spot movement. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewind this to the beginning, and what I want you all to do here. Now, don't count the main character, Naked Snake moving. Don't count him. So, other than the player character, raise your hand once you spot movement in the environment. Is any bigger? Okay, yeah, some of you spotted that. Yep, and you spot it there again. So there's a soldier moving around back there, and he's wearing camouflage. He's blending into the environment, but just the movement is just enough to like draw your eye really quickly. And that's sort of when you have all this sort of affinity in this environment, the only thing that's making the contrast here is the movement. So the movement becomes actually pretty kind of exciting because then you know that you have, at least in the context of this game where stealth is important and you have to be really careful, you have to respond to that, right, in some fashion. Okay, this is a situation I have to deal with. So movement is a extremely important visual actor in these stealth games. Okay, so that is it for this one. We're all done now. I will see you later.